It started when my sister asked to use my house for a small get-together with her friends. She promised it would be quiet, respectful, and over before midnight. I hesitated, but in the end, I said yes. I wanted to believe she had changed. That night, as music echoed through the glass walls and lights flashed from every corner, I knew I had made a mistake. My house wasn't a home anymore. It was her stage. I watched from my car across the street, seeing strangers dance in the space I had worked my whole life to earn. The next morning, I expected an apology. Instead, I saw a moving truck pull up to my driveway. She stepped out wearing sunglasses, holding a clipboard, and giving directions as if she owned the place. Boxes with her name on them filled the porch. I didn't say a word. My silence made her bolder. She smiled, walked up to me, and said, "This house is mine now." Something inside me went still. The kind of stillness that comes before a storm. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I simply stepped aside and watched her give orders to the movers, pretending I was powerless. But I wasn't. Every step she took was one I had already prepared for. She didn't know that before she arrived, I had called my lawyer, and at that very moment he was standing behind the door, waiting to end the performance she had just begun. If you've ever had to stand quietly while someone tried to take what's yours, you'll understand what I did next. If family drama ever tested your strength, subscribe and share your story. You're not alone. It started with a phone call I didn't want to take. The name flashing on my screen was familiar enough to make my chest tighten. I hesitated for a moment before answering, already knowing it wouldn't be a simple conversation. My sister Peyton had a way of turning small favors into chaos. Growing up, she had been the wild one, always chasing attention while I stayed in the background, working quietly, earning every bit of my independence. I live in Boulder now, in a house I bought after years of saving and long hours at the firm. It isn't a mansion, but it's mine, and every corner of it reminds me of how far I've come. Peyton still lives with my parents in Denver. They've always been protective of her, especially Mom. She likes to say Peyton just has a free spirit, as if irresponsibility were something to be celebrated. Dad never says much. He simply goes along with whatever keeps the peace. It has always been that way. When Peyton gets into trouble, they clean up the mess and tell me I'm too cold, too distant, too focused on work. That day, Peyton's voice was unusually sweet. She told me she and her boyfriend Liam were planning a fundraiser for a community art project and needed a place to host it. According to her, it would be one evening, only close friends, quiet and respectful. She said my home had the perfect vibe for it. I could hear laughter in the background music and the sound of a lighter flicking. It didn't sound like someone preparing an art event. It sounded like someone rehearsing another excuse. I tried to say no politely, but she kept talking over me, throwing in words like family trust and help me just this once. Before I could end the call, Mom was on the other line. Her tone carried that familiar mix of guilt and authority. She said, "Bailey, she's your sister. She's trying to do something good this time. Can't you support her for once?" Mom always knew which words would sting. Every sentence felt like a reminder that no matter how much I achieved, I was still expected to be the responsible one, the one who gave in. I agreed eventually, but only after setting 3 clear rules: a limit on guests, no music after 10, and no rearranging or removing anything from the house. Peyton sighed dramatically, then agreed in that exaggerated tone that always meant she wasn't really listening. Before hanging up, she added, "Don't worry, it'll be classy. You'll be proud." When the call ended, I sat there for a while, staring at my phone, trying to quiet the unease that had crept in. The truth was, I didn't say yes because I trusted her. I said yes because I wanted to avoid another round of blame from Mom and awkward silence from Dad. For years, I had played the role of the stable daughter, the one who made things easy for everyone else. It was exhausting. I walked through my house that evening, checking every door, every window, imagining strangers filling the space. It already felt different, like I had handed over something sacred without realizing it. Still, I convinced myself it would be fine. Maybe one night would prove me wrong about her. Maybe this time Peyton would respect the boundaries I had set. But deep down, a small voice kept whispering what I didn't want to admit. The moment I said yes, I had already given her more than she deserved. A week later, the first signs began to appear. At first, they came as a few casual messages from Peyton saying she wanted a bit of music and some lights to make the atmosphere better. I reminded her of our agreement, but she ignored it, saying those details would make the event more professional. Her voice was calm, confident, almost rehearsed. Within a few days, her messages grew longer, filled with plans that no longer sounded like a simple fundraiser. She mentioned hiring a DJ, installing stage lights, and inviting just over 100 guests. Each time her name appeared on my phone, a tightness grew in my stomach. It felt less like she was planning an event, and more like she was slowly taking over my home. When I reminded her again about the rules, Peyton laughed and said I was too uptight and should let people have some fun. She always knew exactly how to make me sound like the rigid sister who ruined everything. I ended the call early and sat in silence, hearing her tone echo in my head. Something was wrong. That night, I called my friend and lawyer, Ethan, who had helped me handle the legal paperwork when I bought this house. I trusted him because he understood how much effort it had taken for me to build a stable life. When I told him what was happening, he didn't seem surprised. He asked if I had any written record showing that Peyton understood the limits I had set. I said no. Ethan was quiet for a few seconds, then told me it would be smart to write a short agreement confirming that she was only borrowing the house for one night. He advised me to make sure she signed it before I handed over the keys. His calm, steady tone helped ease the knot of anxiety inside me. The next morning, I wrote a simple statement and sent it to Peyton by email. She called back within minutes, her voice sharp and defensive. She said I was overreacting, that family didn't need contracts to prove trust. I told her it was only to protect both of us. She sighed, complaining that I never trusted her, then reluctantly said, "Fine, if it makes you feel better, I'll sign it." I printed 2 copies and left them on the kitchen counter for her to sign when she arrived. That evening, Peyton showed up looking annoyed. She grabbed the pen, scrawled her name across the page, and tossed the papers back to me. "Happy now," she said. I didn't respond. She had already started pacing around the living room, talking about where to place the lights and speakers. As she spoke, another woman stepped inside from the back door. Peyton introduced her as her best friend, Ava. She was polite and composed, a calm contrast to Peyton's restless energy. While Peyton moved from room to room, pointing and making plans, Ava stood still, quietly studying the space. Her eyes traveled across the walls and furniture with the focus of someone seeing more than what was on the surface. When Peyton stepped outside to take a call, Ava walked toward me. Her voice was gentle but certain when she said, "She's not telling you everything." I froze, unsure what she meant, but before I could ask, Peyton came back inside, laughing loudly and teasing Ava for judging the house too early. Ava smiled faintly but didn't answer. After they left, I stood alone in the silence, my eyes resting on Peyton's signature at the bottom of the page. A strange heaviness settled in my chest. The agreement was signed, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just allowed something far more complicated than a simple party. By the night of the party, I already had a bad feeling. From the moment I saw the rows of cars lining both sides of the street, I knew Peyton had ignored every boundary we had agreed upon. Music was already shaking the windows before I even reached the front door. When I stepped inside, the air was thick with perfume, laughter, and flashing lights that made my living room look like a nightclub. People I had never seen before were carrying drinks, leaning on the furniture, shouting over the pounding bass. My chest tightened as I realized there must have been over 100 guests. Every inch of the house I had worked for now belonged to strangers dancing with careless joy. I spotted Peyton in the middle of the crowd, wearing a glittering dress and holding a champagne bottle. When she noticed me, she waved like I was a distant acquaintance rather than the homeowner. I tried to get her attention, but she disappeared into a swarm of people before I could reach her. I stepped aside, taking slow breaths, reminding myself to stay calm. I didn't want a scene. Instead, I pulled out my phone and began recording short clips of everything: the overflowing drinks, the noise, the guests spilling out into the yard. Within an hour, one of my neighbors came over, her expression tense. She said the noise could be heard all the way down the block and that several people had already called the police. I apologized, though it wasn't really my fault, and promised to handle it. Minutes later, two uniformed officers knocked on the door, asking to speak to whoever was in charge. Peyton stumbled toward them, smiling too brightly, promising to turn it down a bit. The officers gave her a warning, and as soon as they left, she turned the music back up. I could only shake my head and hit record again. Sometime after midnight, Peyton, clearly drunk, climbed onto a chair with a drink in her hand. She shouted over the noise, "Relax, everyone. This house will be mine soon anyway." The crowd laughed, thinking it was a joke, but her words struck me like ice water. I watched her, my heart pounding. It wasn't a random drunk comment, she meant it. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. His voice was calm but firm when he said, "Don't confront her tonight. Just observe record and let things unfold. We'll handle everything afterward." I listened carefully, watching the chaos around me. His instructions grounded me. I stayed near the wall, filming quietly, focusing on Peyton's behavior and the damage already done. The scratched floor, spilled drinks, and cigarette burns near the patio door. At some point, I noticed Ava standing near the entrance. She wasn't dancing or drinking. Her arms were crossed, her expression cold. When Peyton tried to drag her onto the dance floor, Ava refused and pulled her arm away. They exchanged sharp words I couldn't fully hear, but Ava's face said enough. Disappointment, maybe even regret. Moments later, Ava grabbed her coat and left through the front door without saying goodbye. The night dragged on. Around 2 in the morning, the crowd began to thin. The music faded, but the damage had already been done. Glasses were shattered, stains covered the floor, and my once quiet home smelled of smoke and alcohol. Peyton was slumped on the couch, still laughing with a few remaining guests, oblivious to what she had destroyed. I stood in the doorway, exhausted, watching her, like she was a stranger who had taken over my life. When the last guests finally left, the silence felt heavier than the noise that came before it. I walked through the house, stepping over bottles and confetti, and looked around at what used to be mine. Every detail I had cared for now seemed foreign. The night had ended, but I knew something far bigger had just begun. The next morning, my phone buzzed. It was Ava. Her voice was calm, but carried a quiet urgency as she asked if we could meet in person. I agreed without hesitation. We chose a small cafe in downtown Boulder, one of those quiet places with soft music and wide windows that made everything feel more exposed. When I arrived, Ava was already there, sitting by the window with her hands wrapped around a cup of untouched coffee. She looked different from the night before, serious, tired, almost guilty. She didn't waste time on small talk. "Bailey?" she began softly. "There's something you need to know. I probably should have told you sooner." Her eyes darted toward the door as if afraid someone might walk in. "Peyton and Liam have been planning to move into your house permanently. They've already prepared a gift letter, signed by your mom, claiming she gave the property to Peyton as a family gift." For a few seconds, I couldn't respond. The words didn't make sense. "A gift letter?" I repeated, my voice quieter than I intended. Ava nodded. "Yes. Liam drafted it, and Peyton convinced your mom to sign it one night after too much wine. Your mom thought she was signing something related to Peyton's loan, not the ownership of your house." Ava's voice trembled slightly. "Your mom didn't know what she was signing, Bailey. She was manipulated." I stared at her, trying to absorb every word. I wanted to believe she was mistaken, that this was just a misunderstanding, but something in her expression told me it wasn't. Ava reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and showed me a photo. It was a screenshot of a text from Peyton to Liam sent a few days before the party. The message read, "Once Mom signs, it's basically ours. She won't even remember tomorrow." I felt the blood drain from my face. Ava continued speaking quickly now, as if afraid she might lose the courage to finish. They were talking about moving in after the party, using the chaos as a way to make it seem like Peyton already lived there. They even joked about sending you on a work trip so they could start moving things in gradually. My hands shook slightly as I reached for my phone. I opened my email, searching for any trace of Peyton's involvement beyond what I already knew. Then I saw an email she had accidentally sent to our family group chat 2 days ago. It contained several photos of my house taken from angles that looked professional, with a caption underneath, "Future home just waiting for the paperwork." The air around me seemed to freeze. My heart pounded against my ribs as I realized this wasn't paranoia. It was a plan, and it had been in motion long before I knew it. I looked up at Ava, who was watching me with quiet sympathy. "I'm sorry," she said. "I couldn't let it go on. Peyton thinks she can talk her way through anything but this. This is going too far." I took a deep breath and forwarded the email and screenshots to my friend and lawyer, Ethan. Within minutes, he called back. His tone was steady, analytical, but I could sense the weight behind his words. "Bailey, this could qualify as civil fraud if they try to use that document to claim ownership. Do not confront them yet. Let them make the first move. Every message, every photo you have, keep it. We'll use it if we need to." I thanked him and ended the call, staring down at my phone. Ava reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. "You did nothing wrong," she said quietly. "Just be careful. Peyton won't stop until someone makes her." When we left the cafe, the morning sun was bright but felt distant, almost unreal. As I walked back to my car, the truth weighed on me like a stone. My own sister had tried to rewrite reality using our mother and a forged letter to steal the life I built. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just family drama, it was war. 3 days later, Mom called, sounding strangely calm. Her voice had that tone she used when she was trying to make something sound harmless. "Sweetheart," she said, "Peyton will be staying at your house for a few weeks. She and Liam just need some time to save money before moving into their own place. You have the space, and it would really help them." For a moment, I couldn't even answer. I stood there gripping the phone, listening to the sound of her voice as if it belonged to someone else. "Mom," I said carefully, "that house isn't a rental. It's my home. They can't just stay there." Mom sighed, the kind of sigh that always made me feel like a disappointment. "You've always been so protective of your things, Bailey. Sometimes it's good to share. Peyton is your sister. Why are you making everything so difficult?" Her words struck something deep. It was always like this, me being labeled as the stubborn one while Peyton played the innocent. I tried to explain that there were boundaries for a reason, that what they were doing was more than irresponsible. Mom brushed it off again, her voice tightening. "You're being selfish," she said before hanging up. The line went silent, leaving a hollow sound that stayed in my ears long after the call ended. I sent a message to my friend and lawyer Ethan explaining what had happened and forwarding every piece of evidence I had gathered. Within an hour, he called back, his tone crisp and deliberate. "Bailey, don't panic. I'll contact the local police and verify that your name is the sole legal owner of the property. If Peyton or Liam tries anything, we'll have the record ready." His calmness steadied me, though. Underneath it all, I could still feel the unease building. That afternoon, Peyton texted saying she wanted to stop by with Liam to drop off a few things. The phrasing was too casual to be innocent. I told her I'd be home, and when they arrived, the air in the room shifted immediately. Peyton smiled as if nothing had ever happened. Liam followed her in, quiet but watchful. They said they only wanted to thank me for the party, but their eyes told a different story. They weren't looking at me. They were studying the house. Peyton moved from room to room, tracing her fingers along the furniture, peering into corners, like she was cataloging what belonged where. Liam measured the width of a window frame with his eyes, murmuring something about perfect light. I stood back, forcing myself to stay silent, remembering Ethan's warning. Let her act first. I kept my phone nearby, ready to record if anything crossed the line. When they finally left, I locked the door and went straight to the cabinet where I kept my important papers. Birth certificate, property, deed, loan contracts, all of it. I placed them into a small fireproof safe and slid it under my bed. Ethan had told me earlier, keep every original document secure. They can copy a letter, but not your proof. I followed that advice without hesitation. That night, I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept replaying the look on Peyton's face as she walked through my home. There was something unsettling in her calmness, something that felt planned. Near midnight, I went to the window for some air. That's when I noticed it, a white moving truck parked near my driveway, lights off, engine idling. It stayed there for several minutes, unmoving. My stomach tightened as I watched, waiting for something to happen. Then, without warning, the engine revved and the truck slowly backed out, disappearing into the dark street. I stood there long after it was gone, the image burning into my mind. Maybe it was coincidence, maybe not. Either way, I knew the calm was over. Something was coming, and it had my sister's name written all over it. At 9 that Saturday morning, the truck returned. I was standing by the kitchen window when I heard the heavy engine stop outside. My stomach tightened as I saw Peyton and Liam step out, both dressed neatly, their expressions rehearsed. Peyton held a stack of papers against her chest like a trophy, while Liam followed her with a look of grim determination. When I opened the door, Peyton smiled, the kind of smile that had always meant trouble. "Good morning, Bailey," she said sweetly. "We're just here to finalize things." She handed me a sheet of paper, crisp and freshly printed. "This is the gift letter Mom signed. The house is mine now." Her voice was firm, almost triumphant. I didn't reach for the paper. Instead, I looked at her in silence, remembering Ethan's warning. Peyton mistook my calm for surrender and continued, "Liam and I already talked to Mom and Dad. They agree it's only fair since you've had it long enough." Her words were cold, her confidence built on deception. Without responding, I took out my phone and dialed my lawyer's number. "Ethan," I said quietly, "they're here." Within 20 minutes, Ethan arrived, his presence steady as always, and with him came a local police officer to witness everything. Ethan greeted them politely, then asked to see the document. Peyton hesitated before handing it over, her fingers trembling slightly despite her confident tone. Ethan read it carefully, then raised his head, his voice even. "This letter holds no legal power. It lacks notarization and doesn't meet any state verification standard. It's void." Liam's jaw tightened. Her mother signed it. He snapped, his composure cracking. Ethan nodded. "Even so, it doesn't transfer ownership. This property remains under Bailey's legal title, confirmed by the Boulder County Registry." The officer beside him quietly took notes. For a second, no one spoke. Then Peyton's face flushed red, and she exploded. "You just can't stand to share, can you?" she shouted. "You've always acted like you're better than me. I tried to build something for once, and you turn everyone against me." Her voice echoed through the house that she still dared to call hers. I stood motionless, watching her unravel. Years of buried resentment spilled out with every word. When she accused me of betraying family, something in me went still. I didn't argue. There was no point anymore. The truth was already in motion, and she didn't know it yet. Mom and Dad arrived soon after, Mom visibly shaken, Dad quiet as ever. Mom's eyes went from me to Peyton, searching for a version of the story that made sense. "Girls, please," she whispered. "Can't we just talk this through?" But Peyton interrupted, waving the paper wildly. "You signed this, Mom. You said it was fine." Mom looked at the letter and frowned, confusion washing over her face. I don't remember signing that." Her voice cracked. "I thought it was something about your loan, Peyton." The silence that followed was sharp and suffocating. That was when Ava arrived. She walked in calmly, holding her phone. Without a word, she handed it to Ethan. "I think this will help," she said. Ethan played the recording on speaker. Peyton's voice filled the room, laughing, scheming, telling Liam, "Once Mom signs, Bailey's house is basically ours." The sound drained all the color from Peyton's face. The officer looked at her and Liam, then back at Ethan. "That's enough," he said firmly. "You'll need to leave the premises immediately." Liam tried to protest, but Peyton's voice faltered into silence. Mom started to cry quietly, hands pressed against her mouth. Dad stood beside her, eyes down, not saying a word. The sound of the truck engine came again from outside, low and distant, like the end of something that had been building for far too long. When they left the house, finally felt still. But it wasn't peace. It was the hollow quiet that comes after a storm passes, leaving only debris behind. Weeks later, the silence in my house felt almost too loud. It was the kind of quiet that no music or conversation could fill. The echoes of that morning still lived in the walls, the raised voices, the slammed doors, the sound of the truck driving away. But life, as it always does, moved on. News spread fast in Boulder. The video from Peyton's party resurfaced online, showing the chaos, the arguments, and her drunken speech about owning the place soon. It went viral within days. Her friends distanced themselves one by one until there was no one left to defend her. The girl who always needed to be admired suddenly became a symbol of deceit. She deleted her social accounts, but screenshots and clips kept circulating. I didn't feel satisfaction, only a strange, heavy kind of sadness. Liam's downfall came soon after. Local authorities opened an investigation into his finances when irregularities appeared in the fundraiser records. It turned out that several donations never reached their intended charities. I heard through Ethan that Liam's employer suspended him pending review. The man who once boasted about doing good for the community was now facing fraud allegations. Justice, it seemed, had its own rhythm, slow but precise. Mom called a few times in the following weeks. I let the phone ring. Her messages were softer than before, full of regret and apologies. "I didn't know, Bailey," she said in one voicemail. "If I had, I never would have signed anything." I replayed her voice once, then deleted the message. Some wounds needed distance, not conversation. Ava reached out next through a handwritten letter. She said she was sorry for not warning me sooner, that she had tried to stop Peyton but didn't know how. Her words felt sincere. I wrote back a short note forgiving her but not reopening the door. Sometimes forgiveness is quiet. It doesn't require a reunion. A month later, I put the house up for sale. Too many memories clung to its walls, the laughter that wasn't real, the trust that cracked like glass. Ethan helped me with the process, reviewing every line of the agreement himself. When the sale was complete, I packed what mattered and left for Fort Collins. The first night in my new apartment, I opened the windows wide. The air was crisp, unfamiliar, and free. When Ethan called to check on me, he said something that stayed with me. "You didn't lose them, Bailey. You just stopped pretending they were family." His words lingered long after the call ended. He was right. What I lost wasn't love, it was the illusion of it. Sometimes love without respect becomes control. I learned that standing my ground didn't make me cruel, it made me free. Boundaries aren't about shutting people out. They're about choosing peace over chaos. Thank you for listening till the end. If this story reminded you of a time you had to set your own boundaries, share it in the comments. Your story might help someone else. Don't forget to subscribe, more true lessons are coming.